committee. I have just a couple of questions if there are no others that have any. Could I just ask, Mr. Wallace, you made reference to, I think this being, I forget what you called it, a kind of a ordinary or customary city budget, but I wanted to ask you in particular, if you looked at the, without getting precise mathematically, if you looked in general terms at the average in prior years of the use of one-time adjustments of one kind or another to get us to where we need to be in terms of a balanced budget, is this year an ordinary year in that regard?
Sorry, the bridging strategies are 36 or so this year. They were 25 or so last year. They were higher in prior years. So this is entirely comparable to the ordinary budget process, and the use of bridging strategies is not unusual in any way.
All right, so that's exactly what I was getting at. And in fact, on something like the housing reserve, the housing stabilization reserve, in fact, the amount that's used this year as a bridging strategy is, in fact, I think considerably less than it was in many of the previous 3 or 4 years. It's
less than it was last year, yes.
Okay. Could I just get one of you to confirm, if you would, that I think I'm correct in saying that when the poverty reduction plan was brought forward, there was accompanying that, or as part of that, a work plan for each of the years that listed a whole series of items, some of which involved, and it was very carefully set out down the right-hand column of the page, as I recall, you know, what involved additional budgetary resources that would have to be applied and other things that could be done either within existing budgets or really were more administrative changes that could be made. And could you just confirm to me that the work plan for 2016 that really pretty much all of those measures that were set out in the poverty reduction plan for 2016 have been included in the new and enhanced investments being made in the 2016 budget as proposed?
Absolutely, and I'll ask Mr. Browinger to provide the technical response to that.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. Most of, or all of the objectives for 2016, many of which were non-monetary, were policy-based objectives, are on track for delivery in 2016. And then the financial commitment of the 5.7 million new.
Thank you, Mr. Browinger. And if I could just ask, just in the context, maybe one of you could give just a short answer again with respect to, I'm sorry I didn't turn the clock on, but I'll assume I was a minute and a half or 2 minutes in. I have only one more question. And that is just about this I'll call it the carry forward, or the annualized funding from last year. That this, I mean, some people would sort of say somehow that doesn't count, and I wonder if you could tell me why you include a reference and draw our attention to the fact that there are some sums that were begun last year, such as, say, the free transit for kids 12 and under and a number of other things, a lot of money. Why you calculate that in as part of the investment we're making in poverty reduction in 2016?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So there were some, we did get feedback that, the focus was on just the new and enhanced. It's only $5.5 million. We have a big anti-poverty plan. And what I wanted to do with slide 26 and 27 is to shine a light that $5.5 million net, 6.5 gross, is not the only resources that we're dedicating within this budget, either operating and capital, to address anti-poverty issues. That when you look at the new and enhanced, plus what's in the capital, plus annualizations of prior years' measures, plus things on affordable housing, there is, over $100 million of resources dedicated towards the alleviation of anti-poverty.
Thank you, Mr.
And we just wanted to clarify that, and hopefully slide 26 and 27.
Thank you. My final question comes over to the MLTT and the discussion you were having with Councillor Shiner a few minutes ago. Whoever might answer this, could somebody confirm for me that if there were no transactions pursuant to which we were collecting, and it would be a problem of another order if there weren't any transactions, but if there were no transactions, that would trigger none of these administrative fees being payable to the province of Ontario. Is that correct?
That's basically correct.
All right. So therefore, all transactions are what trigger the payment, and only those transactions, however many there are, trigger the fee. Is that correct?
It is basically transaction driven, yes.
All right, so the principle of the change here really is something of what you could call a user pay, which says, well, if you are engaging in one of those transactions as the purchaser, and you are therefore triggering the payment of this fee of $75 to the province of Ontario, that you pay that fee as the person who's buying the house. Is that correct?
That's correct, and we're basically, yes, and we're following, since the province does that, we said, you know, let's recommend that we do that as well.
Right. They charge us for each of those transactions, and we're simply saying the person who, in effect, triggers that transaction by buying the house is going to pay that fee.
Yes, that's correct.
All right. And right now, just so people are clear, when that fee is triggered, because it's triggered by all the transactions that happen now where land transfer tax is payable, which is all of them pretty much, that fee is spread across the entire tax base. So all taxpayers of the city, in effect, to a small degree, contribute to the transaction fee attributable to the purchase of a house by that one house purchaser.
In effect, yes, because it reduces our gross revenues. Doing this would increase our net revenues and reduce the tax base.
And would you describe this approach as kind of similar to what we do, say, in areas, whether it's the cost recovery we do in ground transportation fees or other kinds of user fees where we try to recover the cost to us of some kind of transaction or service that we provide?
Yes, we have many programs which we try to make as self-sustaining or self-financing as possible, yes.
Thank you. Those are my questions, and I think that's all of the questions that I heard from members of the committee. And so on that note, we would thank you very much for the presentation and again for all of your hard work and everybody that works with you and the entire staff. And it would be time for us to move to questions of staff from members not on the committee on the operating and capital budgets. That's the item 12.2. But thank you very much for your presentation.